Listening Fanfiction presents Behind the Scenes Lies Another Tale by HTTYD Forever, based on the book series Percy Jackson and the Olympians by Rick Riordan, narrated for you by Sears Steinberger. When Percy first met him, he'd been in awe of him. He was Luke Castellan, head counselor of the Hermes cabin and the most wanted man at the camp. And yet he'd be there smiling at Percy, helping him, the dorky little 12-year-old out. Percy thought it had been great, of course, having an older brother figure of sorts. But then one day after practice, Luke had kissed him, and it had changed the world as he knew it. He couldn't tell Annabeth. No, he didn't need another reason for her to hate him, and he wasn't too sure he could talk to Grover about it, so he kept it to himself. And then came Luke's betrayal, and regardless as to what everyone else thought, it stung Percy the hardest. Literally. And then came the meeting on the Princess Andromeda. Luke kept looking at Percy during the whole thing. He asked Agrius and Aureus to take away Tyson and Annabeth, and the others to leave. He turned to Percy. "Join me, Percy," he whispered, cupping Percy's cheek. Sea green eyes met sky blue, and for a moment Percy was about to say yes. But something stopped him. He knew it was wrong, that regardless of how their parents treated them, this wasn't the way to go. And so with a heavy heart and tears in his eyes, Percy shook his head. "I can't." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Luke. I'm sorry." He looked away. Luke wanted to break something, to rip something apart with his hands. With forced calmness, he replied, "Go. Your brother Tyson has already defeated those two idiots." And he pointed out the door with his sword. The next time they met, Luke was mad. No, not mad. Furious. He'd been counting on Percy being the one to deliver the fleece, not Clarice. He could have fought her with a lot less remorse. And then, what did Percy do? He went ahead and got himself cut by the scythe. That idiot! If Luke didn't love him so much, he'd wrap his arms around the younger boy's neck and strangle him. But then the centaurs came and rescued Percy and the others, leaving Luke relieved of his duty to his lord. The next time they saw each other, Percy had managed to sneak into their hideout in that old museum Luke always forgot the name of. Percy had managed to give the skeletons a whiff of his scent, and Luke seriously considered tracking him, hunting him down, and slapping him senseless. Gods, that prophecy was right when it said, "and reach 16 against all odds." After that, they met on Mount Tam. Percy took the weight of the sky, and Luke took a long, long fall. When he recovered, Luke found out about what Thorn had done and sentenced him to eternal kitchen duty, much to the latter's chagrin. Percy, however, had just stormed to his cabin, slammed the door shut, and cried his heart out, dry willing himself and the covers and pillows, when he heard a knock at the door. It was Grover. The way Grover looked at him told him all he needed to know. Grover knew. And honestly, he should have seen it coming with their empathy link. He offered Percy a shoulder on which to cry, and Percy accepted it gratefully. A few months later, found Luke in Percy's room. "Come on, Percy," he begged. "Will start afresh? Just you and me. We can run away to Alaska where there are no gods to bother us, no wars to fight. Please." He looked into Percy's eyes and saw how badly the boy wanted to break down crying. I'm sorry," Percy croaked through his hoarse voice. Luke sighed. "Don't be, Percy. I get that you want to be there for your friends." Percy nodded, looking downward. Luke turned to leave, but he felt a hand on his wrist. "Wait, Luke," Percy said, shyly. "Before you go, I just want one night to remember you by." And he looked up at Luke with those big, innocent doe eyes, and Luke found himself unable to say no. That night was a heated blur of need, passion, and want. However, not a few weeks later, Percy discovered something very alarming. And this is what he got for doing it so shortly before the yearly injection. When Sally had found out, she'd cried and cried. But she'd promised to support Percy. He was her baby, and nothing would ever change that. And then came the quest of the labyrinth. All the while, Percy had been feeling for not just his life. He could see the slightly goldenish hue and the slightly immortal aura that surrounded Luke, and he knew he was as good as gone. He then proceeded to blow up a volcano and nearly get him and his unborn child killed. Then, when they got back in the maze, they'd met Luke, not in his dream as mentioned previous, and he'd made him fight Antaeus. And then came the battle. Camp Half-Blood had won, but at great cost, seeing as a dozen or so had been killed. The next time they met, and by met, I mean truly met, being with the real Luke and not Kronos, was in the Olympian throne room. With a heavy heart, he handed Luke the knife and watched as he stabbed himself. "No," he breathed, cradling Luke's head. "No," he whispered so lowly that only Luke could have heard him had he not been dead. "Luke, no. You had a life to live. You had a son." His body raked through a heavy sob. Then the gods had come. They'd offered him immortality, but he refused. He had too much to live for, and at the end of it all, he wanted to be with Luke. And then Annabeth had kissed him. It's not that he didn't love. He just didn't love her that way, and the relationship had faded abruptly once they found out their mortal parents were siblings. But they'd managed to maintain their friendship. And then Hera had kidnapped him, just when he'd been asleep. She'd put him in a coma for Hades knows how long and erased his memories. The only ones that hadn't left him were of two blondes, both boys named Luke, though one being notably younger than the other. Then came the quest for Thanatos, the battles against Alcyones and Polybotes, the reunitement of him and Annabeth, the blossoming relationship between her and Rhaena, the Aedelin-possessed Leo striking Camp Jupiter, Annabeth's solo quest, the fall to Tartarus, and the final battle. And through it all, he'd kept himself alive by thinking of Luke. Not Lucan Luke Castellan, the would-be 24, son of Hermes, but rather Luke Jackson, the 1.5-year-old son of him and Luke. And then came the schoolwork, of course. He always found spare time for his baby boy, whether it was to cuddle him, or so they could both have some fun with water, or to feed him, or to coo over him. Percy always found spare time. That is, until one day. Percy exited the campus of Rhodes College when he saw his friends all waiting outside for him. Leo, Calypso, Annabeth, Rhaena, Rachel, Nigo, Jason, Piper, Grover, and Juniper. And they were all wearing smiles on their faces. Confused, Percy walked up to them. "What are you guys doing?" he asked, confused. Annabeth smiled at him. After the war, the gods decided that they kinda owed you one. I mean, after the Titan War, you didn't really get anything, and after your loss during the Giant War... A solemn atmosphere filled the air. "Anyways," she continued, stepping aside. And there behind her stood the 19-year-old form of Luke Castellan. He beamed at Percy, albeit a bit nervously. "Hey, Percy," he said shyly. He expected Percy to yell at him, to beat him up, to say he'd never forgive him. What he didn't expect was Percy to run straight at him and give him a hug. Snapping out of his initial shock, Luke returned the hug before placing his thumb under Percy's chin so he could kiss him. When they broke apart, Percy turned to Annabeth. "How?" he asked. Knowing he was referring to the age, she replied, "The gods decided to send him to his age before Kronos started possessing him." The couple looked so happy it made the others want to cry. This was Percy, the sweetest, loyalest, bravest guy on the planet. He deserved some happiness. Grover coughed, drawing all the attention to him. He shifted. "Percy, isn't there something you'd like to tell Luke? About Luke?" Percy blushed whilst the others all stared at him in bewilderment. "Oh," Luke said, slightly disappointed. "You have another boyfriend." He'd been expecting this. After all, the two of them were never exactly a thing, and it had been a year. But he still didn't want it to happen. Percy stared at him. "No, Luke, of course not. Luke is... He said, "I think it'd be easier to show you." And so they all, because Percy decided it was time to let the secret out, headed to Percy's parents' apartment. Luckily, they'd roughly 20 minutes ago Paul to teach and Sally to fetch groceries. They headed to Percy's room, and lo and behold, there stood a cradle. They rushed to it, the girls being faster, of course. There, asleep, lay a 1.5-year-old child with blonde hair and fair skin. Why does he look so much like... Oh! Realization dawned on Jason as he made a connection between the child and the recently resurrected demigod. The noise caused the child to stir in his sleep and slowly open his 2 big eyes. Where Annabeth and Luke had expected to see sky blue, lay ocean green. The baby looked like he was going to cry at all the new faces until he spotted Percy. Mama! He got up and held his arms out since he wasn't nearly tall enough to get out of the cradle. Regardless of how many times he tried, Percy scooped the child up and made a googly face at him, causing him to laugh. He looked at Luke. Who are you? He said, using his extensive vocabulary taught to him by Paul. That's Daddy, Luke, Percy said to his young son. Say hi to Daddy. Hello, he said. Luke was a strangely outgoing child, even for a nearly 2-year-old. Luke cracked a smile. Hey there, he said, using his natural charm with children on his little baby boy. And who are you? Luke, said Luke. Mama say I Luke. He knew words, not grammar. Yeah, Luke smiled. Yeah, he does. Annabeth blinked. When were you pregnant? Percy cringed. A month or 2 before the labyrinth. He turned to Luke. If you weren't holding my nephew right now, you'd be dead, Castellan. Dead! Luke raged. Jason just gaped. Percy Jackson has been pregnant. Before turning on Percy with a wildfire in his eyes. I am more of a man than you. Percy folded his arms and gave him a look. Dude, I went through birthing with the wrong anatomy. I think we all know who the tougher demigod is. Annabeth nodded. Yeah, since if he was pregnant before the labyrinth, it meant he fought a horde of monsters and blew up a volcano whilst managing to maintain his child's safety. You're welcome, by the way, said Calypso. Percy smiled at her. Yes, Calypso, thank you so much. Without you, little Luke and I would have died. Yep, replied Leo. My girlfriend's just that awesome. They all laughed. Luke pulled Percy aside while Annabeth decided it was her turn to hold. You did a good job raising him. Percy smiled, blushing a bit at the compliment. Thanks. You know, Percy, now that I'm here, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. Anything. Do you love me? The question took Percy aback. Yes, Luke, of course I do. Do you trust me? Percy nodded. Always. Will you marry me? The question was so blunt that it took Percy several seconds to realize what had just happened. Luke was in front of him, propped up on a knee, holding out a ring and proposing to him. And for the first time ever, Percy let Luke see his tears. He leaned down to embrace Luke in a kiss. Percy rolled his teary eyes. Of course it is, you big dummy. And FYI, guys, you can stop hiding. We know you're there. Out came his embarrassed friends, embarrassed at being caught, that is, not about invading someone else's privacy. Oh, Percy! Annabeth and Grover gave him a tight hug. Oh, said Piper, we should make Percy wear a dress. Yes, agreed everyone sans Percy. Percy just looked at Luke. Put me in a dress, and Luke won't be able to have any siblings. He smiled sweetly. Honey. Luke gulped, then nodded. He's already pulling out the honeys, Luke sighed. And here I thought you would at least last till your next birthday, Castellan. Likewise, D'Angelo, and FYI, I heard about Will. One day you will propose to him and he will be pulling out so many honeys that you won't even notice the arrow lodged in your throat. Nico gulped. That sounded like Will. That is when he was angry, of course. And so they all parted, keen on letting the couple have some bonding time before Sally and Paul arrived. 6 years later, Luke and Castellan was sitting with his husband, Percy as Castellan, in the living room drinking tea when their son's voice rang through the house. Mom! Hank's being stupid again! Am not. R2! Am not. R2! Am not. R2! Children! Percy yelled. You two are giving me a headache and demigods don't even get headaches. He heard silence before he sighed and continued, Luke, please leave your sister alone. Agave, please don't do whatever it is that annoyed your brother. He could hear some grumbles, but he didn't care. Nice mothering. Luke flipped the news page. Hey, you're the one who wanted to have another one. They're 3 years apart. How was I supposed to know they'd be fighting as if there was only a year's gap? I don't know, asked Rachel. She's your friend. She's yours, too. Then don't forget you're taking Agave to ballet today. Ballet? But you know I hate ballet. I know. Why do you think I made you do it? And you'll be at the park with Luke, Sam, and Sean. Why did my brothers have to be twins? I think the better question is, why did your brothers have to have twins like them? You're actually worried about that? I know I am. Now go get ready. You two will leave in 30 minutes. Grumbling, Luke got up to go get ready for his little girl's recital. Percy smiled, looking at the ring on his finger. 10.5 years. It had been 10.5 years since he'd first met Luke Castellan, and despite all the trauma and grief, it wouldn't change a thing. End of Behind the Scenes Lies Another Tale. If you enjoyed this recording or the content, feel free to leave a comment below or a review at the original story from the link in the descriptions. Thank you for listening.